It was just after sunrise when I stepped off the porch, boots crunching on gravel, the air still cool with a trace of morning dew. The barn door groaned like it always did when I swung it open, the sound that usually marked the start of another long, ordinary day. But this morning, there was nothing ordinary about what I saw. A gleaming chrome sparkling so bright it stung my eyes, sat sprawled right across the barn door like it owned the place. Dealer tags still dangling from the mirror, wax still fresh enough to catch the light, and tires so clean they looked allergic to dirt. And leaning against that car, sipping something from a tall plastic cup, was Karen, the self-appointed queen of our HOA, the woman who could turn a neighbor's barbecue into a courtroom drama, who measured her life in rules and fines, and who smiled the same way a snake might before striking. She didn't even bother pretending it was an accident. No, she smirked through her oversized sunglasses like she'd just set a trap and was waiting for me to step in it. I froze on the spot, my hands still dusty from hauling feed buckets, and all I could hear was the restless lowing of my cattle on the far side of the pasture. They needed hay, and hay needed my tractor. But my tractor needed that barn door. And Karen had made damn sure it wasn't going anywhere. "Morning, Farmer Tom," she called out, her voice dripping with sugar so fake it could rot your teeth. "Hope you don't mind my driveway being redone. Just needed a spot to park my new baby." That's what she called it, her baby. A $200,000 toy that now blocked the only lifeline to my farm. I stood there staring at her, thinking of the way my father used to start each day the same way I did. Tractor out, hay hauled, cattle fed, work done before the sun got too high. This land wasn't just dirt under my boots. It was a family story. My grandfather built that barn with his own 2 hands. My father kept it alive through droughts and storms. And here I was, 52 years old, watching some HOA president treat it like her personal parking lot. I took a slow step closer, gravel crunching, dust puffing up around my boots. "Karen, this isn't a parking spot. This is my barn. I need to get the tractor out." She tilted her head, pretending innocence, but that smirk never slipped. "Oh, I'm sure you can wait a few hours. What do you call it again? Tractor?" She giggled like farm work was some cute hobby, like knitting scarves or growing lavender. And that laugh was the spark that lit the fire in my gut. I swallowed hard, trying to keep my voice steady. "My tractor doesn't take breaks, Karen. My cattle need feeding. That's how this farm runs." But she just waved a manicured hand, dismissing me like I was a mosquito. "Honestly, Tom, your whole operation is outdated. Maybe this is a sign you should modernize, or move on." Move on, those words cut deeper than any insult she could thrown, because I'd heard them before. At HOA meetings, whispered over bottled sparkling water and granite countertops. Maybe Tom should consider selling. Maybe this land could be put to better use. And I knew exactly what better use meant: cookie-cutter homes stacked like boxes, streets named Whispering Pines, fake little neighborhoods with no trace of real work or history. Karen didn't just want me inconvenienced, she wanted me gone. The cattle cried louder, their voices carrying on the wind. The smell of hay mixed with the faint tang of her perfume, sharp and out of place. For a moment it felt like 2 worlds had collided, hers of manicured lawns and power games, mine of sweat, soil, and stubborn survival. "Move the car," I said, my voice low this time. She slid off the hood, took one slow step closer, and smiled wider. "And if I do?" We stood eye to eye, her sunglasses hiding her expression but not the flicker of uncertainty I thought I caught. "Then you'll regret it," I said. Her grin faltered for half a second, but then she pulled out her phone, shaking it like a weapon. "I could report you right now, Tom. Intimidation, harassment, another violation of HOA conduct. After that rooster incident, you're already on thin ice." The rooster incident. That still made me laugh, even through the heat boiling in my chest. My rooster crowed at dawn, exactly what roosters are born to do. But Karen had filed it as a noise violation, claiming it disrupted her morning meditation. She twisted everything, turned ordinary life into ammunition. I clenched my fists but forced myself to breathe slow. Losing my temper would be walking straight into her trap. I knew the board would side with her in a heartbeat. That's how it always was. So I turned on my heel, boots kicking up dust. "Fine," I muttered. "Enjoy your parking spot." Her laugh chased me all the way back to the porch, sharp, smug, like nails on a chalkboard. But as I walked away, something clicked in my mind. Karen thought she'd beaten me. Thought she'd parked her across not just my barn, but my pride. She thought I'd bow, bend, accept it like another rule in her precious handbook. She had no idea what she'd just started. Because out here, when someone blocks your barn door, they're not blocking wood and hinges. They're blocking survival. And survival has a way of fighting back. By noon, the sun had burned away the morning cool, and the heat pressed down heavy, the kind that makes your shirt stick to your back. I tried to go about my chores, stacking wood, feeding chickens, mending a bit of fence. But every few minutes my eyes drifted back to that gleaming blocking the barn, silver paint shimmering like it was mocking me. And of course, word had already started spreading. Out here, news travels faster than a prairie fire in dry grass. A couple of neighbors lingered by the fence, arms crossed, whispering and pointing. I caught snippets carried by the wind. Karen's car, Tom's barn, he's furious. Phones appeared in hands, screens angled discreetly, the way people do when they're pretending not to record. That was the thing about Karen. She didn't just play her games in private. She loved an audience. The HOA board meetings, the endless complaints, the smug way she twisted every little thing into a violation, it was all theater to her. And now this was her stage prop. I kept telling myself to stay calm, to breathe. My father's words echoed in my head like they always did when anger came too quick. Son, anger's like a fire in dry hay. Burns hot, but it'll take the barn with it if you're not careful. So I gave diplomacy one last try. I walked back across the gravel, each step heavier than the last. Karen was still perched nearby, scrolling her phone, bracelets jingling with every swipe. She didn't even glance up when I stopped in front of her. "Karen," I said, voice steady as I could make it. "This is your last chance. Move the car and we can put this behind us." She finally lifted her sunglasses, revealing eyes that gleamed with amusement more than malice. "You're cute when you think you have authority, Tom. I'll move it when I'm good and ready. In the meantime, maybe you can find a hobby that doesn't involve heavy machinery." That was it, the final straw. I didn't yell, didn't curse. I just turned on my heel and walked toward the shed. My boots kicked up a trail of dust, and behind me I heard her laugh again, high and sharp like glass breaking. The shed door creaked open, the familiar smell of oil and earth hitting me all at once. And there it was, my John, the steel-green giant that had pulled plows through stubborn clay, hauled hay wagons stacked higher than the barn roof, and dragged trucks out of ditches when neighbors needed help. That machine wasn't just metal and bolts. It was family. It was survival. I stood there a long moment, my hand running over the warm hood, dust catching in the sunlight. My father's voice echoed again. On a farm, problems are solved with steel, sweat, and horsepower. Never forget that, son. The key slid into the ignition with a click that felt like destiny. The engine roared to life, deep and thunderous, shaking the walls of the shed. Chickens scattered. A couple of cows lifted their heads. Even the oak trees seemed to stand taller, their leaves shivering in the vibration. Out in the yard, Karen flinched. For the first time all day, her smug smile slipped. She lowered her sunglasses, squinting toward the shed as if she couldn't quite believe what she was seeing. I eased the tractor forward, massive tires crushing gravel under their weight. The sound rolled across the fields like a storm brewing, drawing more neighbors to the fence line. Phones shot into the air, recording, eager to capture whatever was about to happen. I stopped the tractor in the yard, cutting the engine. Not yet. If I was going to make a statement, it had to be done right. I climbed down, toolbox in hand, and checked the hydraulic lines, tightened bolts, made sure the loader was ready. This wasn't just about anger. It was about respect for my land, for the machine, for the generations before me who had worked this soil. Karen strutted closer, trying to mask the crack in her confidence. "Tom, you're not seriously thinking of touching my, are you? That's a $200,000 car. You so much as scratch it, and I'll have lawyers on you before sundown." I leaned against the tractor, calm as I could be. "Then move it." Her jaw tightened, she didn't move. The crowd murmured, some whispered nervously, others grinned, hungry for the showdown. Karen wasn't just testing me anymore. She was daring me, betting I didn't have the guts. But she didn't know how far she'd pushed me. I wiped my hands on a rag, climbed back into the cab, and turned the key again. The engine roared, silencing the yard. Birds fled the trees. The neighbors stopped whispering. Even the wind seemed to pause. Slowly, I lowered the loader, hydraulics hissing like a beast waking from slumber. The bucket's edge gleamed in the setting sun, sharp and unforgiving. Corinne's voice cracked as she screamed, "Don't you dare!" But I didn't answer. Words had failed too many times already. Out here, action spoke louder, and the rumble of that John was about to say everything I couldn't. The ground shook as I inched forward, the tractor rolling steady, deliberate, like a freight train that had found its track. Each bump of the tire echoed in my bones. Each hiss of the hydraulics grew sharper, louder, until it felt like the whole world was holding its breath. Corinne stood frozen, clutching her phone like it was a shield. For once, her words didn't come easy. The smugness drained from her face, leaving behind something closer to fear. The spotless and silent sat there like a silver barricade. It wasn't just a car anymore. It was every fine she'd slapped me with, every complaint she'd filed, every smug laugh at every board meeting. And I was done being laughed at. I stopped the tractor a few feet from the bumper. The bucket hovered above the hood like a guillotine. Silence spread over the yard, broken only by the faint buzz of cicadas in the trees. "You all see this," I shouted, turning toward the neighbors lining the fence. "She's blocked my barn all day. My cattle go hungry while she poses with her car and the board backs her up. Well, I've had enough." The words hung in the air. Some neighbors nodded. One even clapped softly before catching himself. Phones stayed up, recording every word, every breath, every second of this standoff. I turned back, my hands tightening on the controls. Corinne shrieked, voice cracking, "Stop, you'll destroy it. I'll sue you for everything you own." But I wasn't listening anymore. My world had narrowed to the growl of the engine beneath me, the vibration running through the steel, the gleam of chrome daring me to act. I pressed the lever, lowering the bucket inch by inch until the sharp edge lined up perfectly with this hood. The moment stretched long, like the pause before a thunderclap. Then came the crunch. It wasn't just a sound, it was a release. Metal buckled under the weight, folding in on itself like paper. The polished hood caved with a screech, the emblem snapping clean off and tumbling into the dirt. Gasps erupted from the fence line. Half the crowd recoiled in horror. The other half grinned like they'd just watched justice served with steel. Corinne staggered backward, her hands flying to her head. "My car, do you even know what it's worth?" I didn't answer. The hydraulics hissed as I pressed harder. Glass spiderwebbed across the windshield, popping and raining down in glittering shards. The alarm blared to life, shrill and panicked, like the car itself was crying for mercy. The neighbors cheered now, some laughing, some hollering like it was a rodeo. Phones captured every angle, every crunch, every spray of glass. Corinne lunged forward, arms flailing. "You're insane, Tom. You'll go to jail for this." The tractor's shadow swallowed her. For a moment she looked so small, her manicured hands trembling against the roar of the engine. Our eyes locked through the cab glass. I didn't say a word. That silence hit harder than anything I could thrown at her. Then I drove on. The roof collapsed with a deafening crack, airbags bursting like surrender flags in the air. The tires squealed, suspension groaned, and the car sank under the weight of the tractor's massive frame. Smoke curled from the engine, dark and sharp, mingling with the earthy scent of hay. I backed up, then rolled forward again, grinding into twisted ruin. Leather ripped, chrome snapped, and the once flawless toy turned into scrap metal. Neighbors shouted, clapped, whistled. One old farmer slapped his hat against his knee and yelled, "About time someone put her in her place." Corinne dropped to her knees, mascara streaking down her face, her voice breaking. "My husband will have your farm, you'll be bankrupt." But her words were thin, hollow, drowned out by the final groans of metal collapsing on itself. I eased off, pulling the tractor back, the bucket raised high. Where the had once gleamed like a trophy, there was now nothing but a mangled heap of steel, smoking and broken. I cut the engine. Silence crashed over the yard, broken only by the dying whimper of the car alarm. My boots hit the dirt with a heavy thud as I climbed down. The neighbors waited, eyes wide, phones still recording. Karen stood there trembling, her hat crooked, her voice gone raw. "You should have moved it when I asked," I said simply. The crowd erupted again, laughter and applause mixing with disbelief. Karen pointed at me with a shaking hand. "I'll ruin you, Tom. I'll have the sheriff here in 5 minutes." I shrugged. "Good. I'll explain how your car blocked my livestock access all day. Pretty sure the law doesn't look kindly on that." Her mouth snapped shut. For the first time, she looked around for support, but the neighbors weren't rushing to her side. If anything, they looked like they'd been waiting years for this moment. The balance had shifted. Karen wasn't the untouchable queen of the HOA anymore. She was just another neighbor who'd pushed too far and paid the price. The wreck still hissed and smoked when the sound of tires on gravel drew every head around. A county sheriff's cruiser rolled up slow, just trailing behind it like a warning. Deputy Miller climbed out, his young face half shadowed by the brim of his hat. For a moment, he just stared at the twisted heap of metal in front of my barn. His mouth opened, then shut again, as though words weren't enough for what he was seeing. "Tom," he said finally, voice low and steady, "want to explain what happened here?" I spread my hands, calm as I could be. Car was blocking my barn. I asked her to move it. She refused. My tractor needed out. Guess the rest writes itself. Behind me, Karen shrieked. Her voice cracked from all the screaming. "Don't you listen to him, Miller. He destroyed that's destruction of property, criminal damage, felony level. Arrest him right now." Miller raised a hand, steady as a traffic stop. "Ma'am, I need you to calm down. I've got to hear both sides before I do anything." Karen gestured wildly at the wreck, nails flashing in the fading light. "What's there to hear? Look at it. Look at what he did to my car." The neighbors crowded closer, phones still held high. Their whispers swirled around us like wind in tall grass. Some sounded shocked. Others barely tried to hide their amusement. I stepped forward, voice even. "Deputy, I asked her all day to move it. That car blocked my barn door from sunrise until now. I couldn't feed my cattle, couldn't haul hay. She refused to budge." Karen spun toward me, her face blotchy and streaked. "That is not true. I told you it was temporary. You could have waited." I shook my head. Livestock don't wait, and the law doesn't either. Miller's lips twitched like he knew where this was going. Out here, everyone did. I reached into my back pocket and pulled out a folded paper, weathered soft from years of use. I held it up. "Agricultural Protection Act. Blocking access to livestock facilities is a violation. Doesn't matter if it's with a wheelbarrow or..." A murmur swept through the neighbors. Some chuckled. One muttered, "Serves her right." Karen froze, her voice dropping to a whisper. That can't apply here. This is a residential neighborhood." Miller cleared his throat. "Technically, ma'am, Tom's property is still zoned agricultural, grandfathered in, which means the statute applies." Her face drained of color. No, this isn't happening." Then louder, shrill and ragged, "This is abuse of power. He's twisting the law." I folded the paper neatly, slid it back into my pocket. "You wanted rules, Karen. That's one you forgot to read." She sputtered, searching for her footing, but Miller snapped his notebook closed with finality. "Here, how this is going to go. Karen, I'm citing you for unlawful obstruction of agricultural operations. You'll get a fine. If this happens again, penalties will be worse." The crowd gasped. Some cheered outright. Karen wailed like a child told Christmas was canceled. "A fine? You're fining me? I'm the victim here." Miller's tone didn't budge. "The law doesn't see it that way, ma'am." Her manicured hands trembled as she crumpled the citation into her fist. She spun to the neighbors, desperate for allies. "This community will not stand for this. I'll have the board on my side." But the faces looking back weren't nodding this time. They were crossed arms, raised brows, eyes hard with something close to satisfaction. A voice called out from the fence line. "You've been bullying folks for years, Karen. Looks like karma finally showed up with 4 wheels and a plow." Laughter rippled through the crowd. Another voice chimed in sharper. "We're tired of your nonsense. Maybe it's time someone else ran the HOA." Karen's mouth fell open, searching from face to face. but one by one her hive turned away. I stood quietly by the tractor watching her crumble. For years she'd ruled with fines and fear. Tonight she looked small, her power slipping like sand through open hands. She stomped a foot, voice cracking. "You'll regret this, Tom, I swear you will." I tipped my hat, calm as ever. Maybe, but at least my cattle are fed. The crowd erupted with laughter, not cruel but relieved. For the first time they weren't laughing at me. They were laughing with me. Miller gave me a nod, his cruiser lights flashing faint red against the smoking wreck. "Take care, Tom. I'll file the report. But between you and me, I think this neighborhood just witnessed more justice than a courtroom could ever hand out." When he pulled away, the last of the sunlight painted the ruins in gold. Karen slumped on the curb, mascara streaks cutting down her cheeks, a fallen monarch beside the wreck of her throne. And me, I walked back to the porch, boots heavy, heart lighter than it had been in years. I poured a glass of sweet tea, leaned back in the chair my grandfather built, and let out a breath I felt like I'd been holding forever. But I knew deep down this wasn't over. People like Karen don't vanish quietly. They plot, they fume, they wait for their next strike. And if she came again, well, she'd learn I had more than just a tractor on my side. The night after the incident was the quietest my farm had felt in years. No HOA board emails buzzing my phone, no Karen's laughter echoing in my ears. Just the crickets, the cattle settling in their stalls with full bellies and the steady creak of the porch rocker beneath me. For once, the air didn't feel heavy. It felt free. But freedom never lasts long when someone like Karen is involved. By morning, the story had already spread beyond the neighborhood. At the feed store, men slapped my back, grinning as they asked, "So, Tom, how's that holding up under the John?" I just sipped my coffee and shrugged, letting them draw their own conclusions. Their laughter filled the store like the smell of fresh hay. Not everyone was laughing, though. The HOA board called an emergency meeting within days. They never used words like emergency unless something rattled their little empire. The meeting was held in the air-conditioned clubhouse. Rows of bottled water lined up neat as soldiers, clipboards stacked on the table like they were preparing for trial. And there she was, front and center, pale but still trying to wear her crown. Karen clutched her citation like it was Exhibit A in a grand conspiracy against her. She wasted no time. "I demand Tom's expulsion from this community. He destroyed my vehicle, threatened me, and undermined the authority of this board. He must pay damages immediately. If the board does not act, I will pursue litigation." Her voice cracked on the last word, but she covered it with a glare sharp enough to cut glass. I stood, boots dusty from the day's work, sweat still drying on my shirt. That blocked my barn all day. My cattle went hungry because she thought her car was more important than my livelihood. I warned her. I called the sheriff. I even came here first. She ignored it all. That tractor was the last choice, not the first. Karen slammed a manicured hand on the table. "He's twisting it. He's dangerous. He should not be allowed near decent families." And then, for the first time in years, voices rose against her. A mother near the back stood up. Her voice shook, but she spoke anyway. "Karen, you fined my son for riding his dirt bike on our own property. You said it was a community hazard. He hasn't ridden since. He's 12. An older couple spoke next. "You tried to ban our flagpole because it didn't match your color scheme. We've lived under that flag for 40 years. You said it clashed with community aesthetics." More followed. One by one, neighbors rose, their voices carrying the weight of every slight, every fine, every humiliation. Karen's face went pale, her eyes darting from side to side as the walls of her empire cracked. It was like watching dominoes fall. Years of silence broke all at once. The fear she had thrived on evaporated, replaced by something sharper, resentment. By the end, the board didn't even need to deliberate. They voted right there, unanimous. Karen was removed as president of the HOA. Just like that, the queen lost her crown. She stormed out, muttering about appeals and lawyers, her heels clacking like gunshots on the tile. But no one followed her. No one clapped. No one offered comfort. Her power had dissolved in a single vote. I didn't celebrate. Truth be told, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Because power rooted in fear never lasts. The minute people stop being afraid, the empire crumbles. Walking home under the warm evening sky, I felt the weight lift even more. The barn door stood open when I got back, the tractor safe inside, a smear of silver paint still clinging to the loader like a badge of honor. The cattle mooed in greeting, calm now, their routine restored. I stood a long while by that scar in the dirt where they had once sat, its shadow burned into memory. Most folks would filled it in, smoothed it over. Not me. I left it there. A reminder. A reminder that when arrogance parks itself across your life, sometimes the only way forward is straight through it. Life on the farm settled into rhythm again after Karen's fall. The cattle were fed, the hay stacked, and the John rumbled like it always had, steady as a heartbeat. For the first time in years, the air felt lighter. Neighbors waved more freely when I passed, kids laughed louder down the road, and the constant shadow of Karen's watchful eyes seemed to fade. But scars linger, even when the wound looks healed. The wreck of her was towed off eventually, leaving behind a bare patch of churned earth in front of the barn. Most folks would reseeded it, covered the scar with fresh grass. I didn't. I liked seeing it there. Every time I walked past, I saw not destruction but a reminder that arrogance had a breaking point and mine had been crossed. Neighbors started talking to me more, little conversations that once never would happen. A young dad leaned over the fence one afternoon, sheepishly admitting how Karen had fined him for leaving his garbage cans out an hour too long. An older woman laughed as she told me Karen once wrote her up for planting tulips that didn't match the neighborhood's color scheme. Everyone had a story. And now, without Karen's rule hanging over them, those stories poured out like water from a broken dam. It made me realize something I hadn't before. For years, I'd thought I was fighting alone. My rooster, my barn, my tractor, all under fire while the rest of the neighborhood watched from their windows. But they weren't silent because they didn't care. They were silent because they were afraid. And when one person stands up, fear cracks. Still, Karen wasn't the type to vanish into the night. I knew it. I could feel it like a storm gathering beyond the horizon. She'd lost her title, her influence, her shiny symbol of power. People like her don't take humiliation quietly. They stew, they plot, they wait for another chance to strike. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the fields in gold, I found myself tightening bolts on the tractor. A shadow fell across the ground, and I looked up to see a boy standing there. Couldn't have been more than 14. He shifted awkwardly, hands shoved deep in his pockets. "Mister," he said, almost too soft to hear. I set the wrench down, wiping my hands on a rag. "What's on your mind, son?" He swallowed, eyes flicking to the tractor, then back at me. "I've never seen anyone stand up to her like that. The way you drove right over her car. How'd you do it?" For a moment, I just looked at him, at the way his eyes held a mix of awe and fear, like he wasn't sure if he should admire me or be scared of me. I glanced at the John, its green body gleaming faint in the last light of day, the smear of silver still etched on the bucket. "Son," I said slowly, "sometimes you fight with words, sometimes you fight with laws, and sometimes—" I patted the steel hood, feeling the hum of the machine beneath my palm. "Sometimes you fight with horsepower." He laughed nervously, but I could see the lesson sinking in. Not about tractors but about standing your ground. About refusing to let someone push you off your own land. After he left, I sat there a while, watching the stars prick through the sky. The farm felt different now, lighter, freer, but I couldn't shake the thought of Karen. Somewhere out there, she was seething, plotting her next move, and I knew when she came back, it wouldn't be with a smile or a clipboard. But I also knew something she hadn't figured out yet. When you stand rooted in the soil of who you are, no storm can rip you out. I leaned back against the tractor, listening to the crickets and the soft shuffle of cattle in the barn. For tonight, the silence was enough. But I kept my guard up, because on this farm, peace never lasted long. Weeks passed, and though Karen no longer held her throne, the echoes of her reign lingered. The HOA board still mailed their little notices: trim the hedges, repaint the fence. But without her voice breathing down their necks, the rules felt toothless, more like polite suggestions than weapons. But Karen herself, she wasn't gone. She was quieter, yes, but quiet from someone like her wasn't peace. It was plotting. Every time I passed her house, I could feel it, the curtains shifting, her eyes tracking me from behind glass. The driveway sat empty where the once gleamed, but I knew she hadn't given up. People like Corinne never do. One Saturday morning, I was patching a section of fence when a neighbor ambled over, coffee mug in hand. He nodded toward Corinne's place, lowering his voice. "Word is she's been talking lawyers, says she'll sue you for damages, says she'll bleed you dry." I drove another nail into the post, the hammer striking steady. "Let her talk. Lawsuits need evidence, and she's got an audience full of witnesses." He chuckled. "Yeah, most of us saw it. Some even filmed it. She doesn't realize she lost that battle the minute she picked it." Still, the thought lingered in my head long after he left. It wasn't fear exactly, it was caution. Corinne had money, connections, and a stubborn streak that rivaled my own. If she couldn't win on the street, she'd try in a courtroom. That evening, I found myself sitting on the porch, staring at the scar in the dirt where her had once sat. The air smelled of cut grass and hay. The barn door creaked gently in the wind, swinging wide, unobstructed. For the first time, it didn't just feel like a doorway. It felt like a symbol, open, defiant, untouched by her control. I thought about my father then, about all the nights he'd sit in this same chair, watching the horizon, knowing storms would come but trusting the land to hold. His words played in my head. Sometimes the strongest people are the ones who stay silent the longest. And I realized I wasn't angry anymore. Not the way I had been. Crushing that hadn't just been about revenge. It had been about ending the silence, about showing her and everyone else that some lines can't be crossed. A week later, the HOA tried to regroup. They called another meeting, though this one felt different. Fewer whispers, fewer stares. The room didn't tilt toward Corinne anymore. She sat off to the side, arms crossed, lips pressed tight, as if daring anyone to meet her gaze. I stood and spoke plain. "I don't want fights. I don't want trouble. I want to farm my land the way my father did and his father before him. If that means the board sends me notices about my fence paint, fine. But I won't be bullied off my land. Not by a car, not by a clipboard, not by anyone." The room was quiet after I finished. Then slowly, one by one, heads nodded. Even the board members who'd once hung on Corinne's every word couldn't deny it anymore. The tide had turned. Corinne pushed her chair back hard, the legs screeching against the tile. "You'll all regret this," she spat. "This community is falling apart because you let one stubborn farmer break the rules." She stormed out, heels clicking sharp against the floor, the door slamming behind her. The room let out a breath it had been holding. On my walk home, the cicadas hummed, the sky glowed orange with sunset, and I realized something important. Corinne wasn't just my problem anymore. She exposed herself. The neighbors saw her for what she was, and that was a battle no tractor could ever win or lose. It was won by truth. That night I stood in the barn, running a hand over the John's hood. Dust had settled, but the smear of silver paint still lingered faint on the bucket. I didn't wipe it off. That scar told a story, one the whole neighborhood would remember. And though I knew Corinne wasn't done, she never would be, I felt ready. Because when the next storm came, I wouldn't be standing alone. The weeks rolled into months, and the neighborhood slowly reshaped itself in Corinne's absence. The air felt lighter, less tense. Kids played louder in their yards, dogs barked without fear of fines, and neighbors lingered longer at fences, talking like people instead of suspects. Without her shadow looming over every decision, the place felt like a community again. Corinne, of course, didn't disappear. She sulked at board meetings, muttering about bylaws and conspiracies, but her voice no longer carried. The power she once wielded like a weapon had dulled. And though she still sent the occasional lawyer's letter, they landed with less bite than before. Neighbors ignored them. The board ignored them. Even the county rolled their eyes. I still saw her sometimes, peeking from her window as I drove the tractor across the pasture. Her house looked smaller now, not in size but in presence. It no longer commanded attention. It just sat there, one more roof among many. Life on the farm returned to its steady rhythm. Sunrise meant chores. The barn door creaked open, wide and free. The cattle were fed, the hay stacked, the tractor rolling strong. And every time I passed that scar in the dirt where her had once sat, I felt something I hadn't in years, pride. Not for crushing a car, but for protecting what mattered. One evening, as I sat on the porch sipping sweet tea, a neighbor stopped by, a woman I barely knew before all this. She lingered at the steps, then said, "Tom, I just wanted to thank you. You stood up when none of us could. You reminded us we don't have to take it." Her words sat with me long after she left, because that was the real truth of it. Crushing that wasn't just about me and Karen. It was about all of us. About reminding people that fear only works as long as you let it. The farm had always been my world, my battles, my heritage, my burden. But that fight showed me it was more than just my fight. It was the neighborhood, too. I still think about Karen sometimes, sitting in her kitchen with her walls of rules and clipped power. I know she's not done. People like her never stop scheming. And one day she might come at me again with another angle, another shiny toy, another trick up her sleeve. But she doesn't understand something that I finally do. Real power isn't chrome or money or a seat at a board meeting. Real power is roots that run deep, the kind that storms can't tear out. Real power is knowing who you are and refusing to let anyone bulldoze it away. For me, that power came in the shape of a John green steel steady under my hands, carrying the weight of generations. For someone else, it might be different. A family, a job, a home they built with their own sweat. But the principle is the same. When someone parks arrogance across your barn door, literal or not, you don't bow. You find a way forward. That scar in the dirt, that smear of silver paint on the loader, they'll fade with time. But the lesson won't. Karen thought she could block me into silence. What she never understood was that silence ends when someone decides enough is enough. The night air grew cooler as I rocked in my chair, the stars bright above, the tractor glinting faint in the moonlight from its shed. The barn door stood wide, open to the dark, unblocked and free. And I knew whatever came next, I was ready. Because this wasn't just about farming or tractors or barns. It was about dignity, about standing your ground when it counts. So if you take anything from my story, let it be this. Don't let arrogance block your barn door. Not your land, not your work, not your life. Protect it with everything you've got, even if that means getting creative with the tools in your hands. I raised my glass of tea to the quiet night. For now, the farm was still, the cattle rested, the land breathed easy, and the war, at least this one, had been won. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe and join us for the next mystery on HOA Hunter Stories.